As-salamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the New Muslim Workshop. My name is Mahmoud, and today I wanted to talk to you about why the man hates Islam. Now, when I refer to the man, I'm actually talking about institutions, corporations, governments. Why would they have a problem with the idea of Islam becoming the dominant religion? Islam in and of itself has rules and regulations, and these rules and regulations require those who adhere to religion, those who are followers, worshippers of Allah, those who are devout Muslims, to stay away from certain industries. Today I'm going to give you 6 industries that Muslims, if they become the dominant population, they will stay away of, and thereby these institutions will lose money. And that is something that the man wouldn't be very happy with. The first industry that Muslims would affect would be the adult industry. And when we say adult industry, it's not necessarily just about pornography as videos or about audiobooks that are sleazy or risque or anything like that. It also involves things like brothels and things that governments have legalized in the past. And so the adult industry, which we will start with on the list of 6 different industries that Muslims will cause a problem for if they become the dominant religion, the adult industry comes in at number 6. And the adult industry in 2025 alone will bring in $29.3 billion. And so that's a lot of money in any metric, but this puts it at number 6 on the list. And again, as we mentioned, this involves all forms of pornography, be it the video form, the photos, the brothels, whether it's escort services, whether it's adult clubs where they present women in a degrading form and they basically present them as nude dancers. So all of this industry, which again, conservative estimates put their profits at around $29.3 billion a year, would be affected if Islam became the dominant religion and if Muslims actually adhered to their religion. Number 5 on the list would be the music industry. And this is a surprise to me, mainly because I thought the music industry generated a lot more money than this. But the music industry, and if you're not aware, music in and of itself is considered haram in Islam. And so let's look at music as just one big clump. If we're talking about whether it's pop music, rock music, all of that stuff, and all the money that generates, and then all the money that's generated by concerts, and then all the money that's generated by album sales and generated by Spotify streams, all of that as an industry generates $65 billion per year. And that's the estimated amount that the music industry will make in 2025. So in 2025, $65 billion. Now let's say that the Muslims decide to adhere to their religion and stop listening to music. Let's say 50% of them. That brings profits down from 65 to about 32.5 billion. Can the music industry survive something like that? That's one thing that the man wouldn't stand for. Number 4 on the list is the tobacco industry, with $295.4 billion a year. Now, in Islam, there's a rule that the Prophet ﷺ taught us, and that rule is لا ضرر ولا ضرار. And it comes from hadith, it comes from a tradition of the Prophet. So the idea that the Prophet ﷺ is saying is that you should not hurt yourself and you should not hurt others. And no one can deny the fact that tobacco in all its forms, whether it's cigarettes, whether it's shisha, hookah, whether it's cigars, whether it's something that you chew tobacco, whatever the case is. In all its forms, we're talking about something that causes cancer, whether it's tongue cancer, throat cancer, lung cancer. The carcinogenics that are part and parcel of the production of tobacco industry products, and in some cases even vapes and so on and so forth, we'll clump them all together. These generate $1/3 of $1 trillion per year. And the idea of stopping this would terrify this industry, would the idea of people actually abandoning the use of tobacco. And because of obviously the fact that it hurts you as a person and hurts others around you, notwithstanding the idea of, well, I mean, if you die from cancer because of cigarettes, you're causing strife for your family. So, I mean, that's something that one should consider and think about. But ultimately, the idea here is that tobacco is a massive industry, and the idea of us ignoring it or not purchasing tobacco would cause probably issues with them as lobbyists, because they do lobby the politicians to bring down certain laws and ignore certain things that we would want to ban. So in this context, we are saying that number 4 on our list today is of industries that Islam would affect. And I'm saying if people were actual adherents to Islam, because there are many people who are Muslim, but they do smoke and they do consume tobacco. And in many cases, it's become a cultural phenomenon. If you go to Jordan, it is bizarre if somebody is actually not smoking in a gathering. This is something I've faced many times when I've gone to Jordan, where the majority of males in a gathering will be smokers. Number 3 on our list is one of the worst ones, in my opinion, and I see this as a person who resides in Australia. As a person who resides in Australia, number 3 reason that the man hates Islam and the idea of Islam becoming a dominant religion is the gambling industry. Now, as someone who lives in Australia, we see the constant advertising, and we look at all these different places that have pokies. This is what they call slot machines here in Australia, and things like the lotto. Lotto, or in other countries, even Arab countries, they call it al-ya nasib, is where you go and you pay a certain amount of money, you get a ticket, and then there is like a drawing and you could win the lottery. Is this gambling? Absolutely. Now, this is a form of gambling that is sanctioned by the government. The government is okay with it, even though many people in Australia suffer and have lost fortunes and have become homeless and it's devastating to the Australian population. And yet, this is something that the government is refusing to put aside and to ban. And if anything, they advertise it, they encourage it. There's lotto ticket stations almost everywhere you want to go. And it's kind of associated with the newspaper stands. You buy the news and buy a lotto ticket. This is an industry that globally brings in $500 billion. Now, if you don't know what $500 billion, that's approximately $500 billion a year. A year. $500 billion a year just from gambling. This gambling obviously also includes things like the slot machine and the blackjack gambling situation, and Las Vegas as a concept, and Atlantic City as a concept. These institutions have historically been well known to be mafia controlled. And so if Muslims become the dominant religion, or Islam becomes a dominant religion within any of these countries, the idea of gambling would become haram. And the practice of gambling would become haram. And if the practice of gambling becomes haram, a lot less people will indulge in gambling. Number 2 on the list is the alcohol industry. It's really kind of straightforward and clear, but obviously, if Islam becomes the dominant religion and if its people were adhering to Islam properly, then there would be no place for alcoholic beverages in the day-to-day lives of people. Here in Australia, they have a culture of drinkers. The alcohol consumption is nuts. It's off the charts. And historically, this was kind of part and parcel of being Australian. Thankfully, people, because of the health hazards of alcohol, have slowly sort of shifted away from massive, uncontrolled alcohol consumption in Australia, that is. I'm only talking about Australia at this point. But globally speaking, alcohol accounts for $1 trillion worth of profits. Imagine that. $1,000 billion of profit off of the selling of alcohol. That's crazy. To me, that's nuts. Especially that the consumption of alcohol will lead to multiple forms of cancer, will lead to multiple forms of liver failure, will lead to domestic abuse, will lead to car accidents on the roads, will lead to fights in the streets, intoxication, people getting injured because of their intoxication. And one doesn't really have to go into detail with that, but we can present evidences where alcohol consumption increases in the amount of domestic abuse that happens in a country. Now, the number one industry that would be terrified for Muslims to take a dominant position in any population is the banking industry. And the reason why Islam and Muslims don't like banks that much is because of usury or haram transactions that include riba. Riba is considered, if you indulge in riba, it's considered declaring war against Allah and His Prophet. And so the people who are devout Muslims, people who adhere to Islam, would try to minimize the amount of riba or usury transactions or dealing with usury on a day-to-day level, because the banking industry makes approximately $8.9 trillion in profit per year. From what? From renting out loans, renting out money. You come, you borrow money from me, and I increase it and increase it and increase it until I make almost double or more from the money that I've given you. So the act of renting money in Islam is haram. It's not permissible. And so the industries of finance and banking, if they do not adhere to the Islamic requirements that do not include usury, are industries that are not encouraged in Islam and are stayed away from. To wrap things up, these industries have a vested interest in Muslims staying at a minimum number in the population, and even if they become a dominant number, for them not to adhere to their faith, to not follow their deen, their faith, and as such would go and indulge in things that are haram, like gambling, like drinking, like dealing with usury, like indulging in the adult industry. All of these industries would be affected if Muslims became the dominant religion. Now, you have to ask yourself, if these sharks and piranhas were against Islam, does that make Islam a bad thing or a good thing? If Islam is safeguarding your safety and your sanity and your home and your society and your culture and tries to maintain your health, how is it a bad thing? And that's something you have to sit down and think about. Why would these industries that prey on the general public and that influence the media and that influence politicians by lobbying for more benefits to them and less benefits to you, be the thing that makes your decision on whether Islam is good or bad? What you should do is you should go and you should read the Quran and decide for yourself. Read the Quran from a trusted Islamic source, not from somebody who is an Orientalist or someone that wants to paint Islam in a bad light, and then make a decision for yourself. If Islam is such a bad thing, why would it try to protect you? Why would it try to protect society? Thanks for listening. Jazakumullah khair. And As-salamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you have any questions or if you have any suggestions for other industries that are basically trying to tear down society as a whole or in part, please write them in the comments below. Think about subscribing. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.